response that the person is giving you.
Yes.
Right? The rule of thumb is you pump it up, start over, pump it up. But if they're kind of going up, down,
Then you just keep on doing it,
keep going,
doing it
right?
as a cycle.
Right, or be, you can be very explicit. Okay, you feel that way, but now it's like a stair step. You're going to start right here, and you're going to go up again.
Yeah,
you're going to start right here, and then go up again.
That's neat.
That's a good one, yeah.
Right.
We'll have to remember that one.
Right, so you could, it's a nice metaphor. You're going to climb a set of stairs. You're never going to go back to the basement. Each one, you're going to start over, though. It's important to... It's important to begin this submodality amplification from zero and then amplify it. Then start from zero and amplify it, because that's what boosts up the kinesthetic response. Great. How'd it go with the coffee?
I think I thought the 9 o'clock tomorrow.
You'll know. Right. That's the bottom line. I mean, when we, in most of these techniques, or with a client, when you're working, generally the way we have to test it is sort of in imagination or virtual reality. The real test is, there's a pot of coffee back there.
But no, I told him that I'm going to have one. Actually, not this. I was intending to do it myself. Like fresh one.
Oh, a fresh one.
A fresh one.
Great.
Because I like at 4 o'clock to have coffee.
Okay.
But I didn't go.
That's right. It's after 4 and you're having
Yeah.
it. Great. As long as you feel that that's a choice that you've made.
Yeah, but usually there is something in me. Have coffee, have coffee, have coffee, have coffee.
No.
Not this time.
Is it on vacation or what?
An open vacation.
That's, I mean, what a wonderful thing. I just forgot to have my problem. Wonderful. Excellent.
It's a nice one to put on the wall.
Great. And how did it wrap up over here with Jim, you and Ann? How did that, Ann?
It was great.
I chose the email one that I mentioned before because I do get it's a good example of how I get overwhelmed. I've got a really good strategy for that. Sorry, yes. Shucks, I had a real good strategy. What worked, well, Jim kept running the visual, which is a logical thing to do with emails, again and again, and it wasn't really shifting it. And then he put in the auditory, and I almost went hysterical. So I think that really sort of blew it. We'll find out this evening. Blew it out of the water. And then he did a new behavior generator swish with my new timelines, and wow. That was just, you did that really well, thank you, Jim, of creating the behavior generator here and then dipping into my past for resources and then taking it all the way through the past from my childhood and installing it all the way through to my future. So it's just like, yeah.
Wonderful.
Wonderful, yes.
All right. That's
Thank
great.
you very much.
That's a good utilization, too, of this little fine point that's in your handouts to check and make sure that the client can't get the compulsion back in any other system. In other words, it is possible to blow it out visually and they can still regenerate it auditorily. And this was kind of linked to that, and you took care of it in both systems. Nice. And from the back of the room, there's a question. Yes? Oh, the microphone? Certainly, sure. We should get you on camera. There is a man behind the camera. The question is?
Yeah, I think it's great, to eliminate a compulsion, and it's exciting. I was wondering what it would take to actually create one.
Right.
Like if you wanted to be compulsed to do something, how would you do that?
That's a great question, isn't it? I mean, boy, think about all the things you'd really love to be highly motivated and compulsed to do so that you never forgot. Your exercise program, your dietary regime, whatever it may be. So from the group, how could you do that? Let's pick a behavior that, name one that we can play with that you'd like to be compulsed to do.
Exercising.
Okay, great, exercising. So there's the thing, exercising. So how could you begin to generate this as a compulsion? Or something approaching a compulsion? You could find something that is kind of, again, an example of a compulsion in a similar context. right? Some physical activity that you really never forget to do, right? Or that's a heck of a lot of fun because it's, you know, and it could be in any field of life, as long as it's physical. Right? Or it doesn't have to be in a field necessarily. It could be. So, and you could elicit the submodalities of that, right? And begin to install and structure the idea of your exercise program on your timeline in the future, coded with those submodalities. Right?
Okay, do you have a specific process? Like, you know, there's a 5-point process.
Right.
Would you want to follow this, but kind of switch it around?
And this
or?
one, again, it would be something. The one that I'm familiar with is the nearest to what you're describing is a pattern that Leslie Cameron Bandler developed called Creating Compelling Futures. And it's a timeline pattern. It's written up in, I think, one of her books in Solutions, I think it is, yeah. And it's a way to install resources and needed behaviors in the future. So that would be one avenue. The other is simply to begin to use the principles that you're learning here, that emotional states are always coded with submodalities. It's the answer to the question of how the thermos knows, how your brain, how do it know? How do you know that this is motivating versus repulsive? The way you code it in submodalities. So, you know, if you really want to exercise, and that's what the conscious mind says, but you think about exercising in the future and you see yourself dissociated over there and it's a small dark picture, you're unlikely to really be motivated to do it. But if it's, you know, if it's fully associated, you're in the gym, you got these amazing guns and you're looking in a mirror, right, and you feel great, and that's what's on your timeline, that's going to be a heck of a lot more motivating.
And then, what level is that? I mean, you talked about switch patterns being on that
Right.
behavior level. Would this all be on ecology or?
Well, it's really going to depend on what kind of compulsion or what kind of motivation that you want to generate or create. Most sort of classic compulsions of the type we're dealing with are primarily kind of clustered towards the lower logical levels, like, you know, behaviors, responses in an environment, eating too much food, you know. And yet often these behaviors can be linked to identity structures. If you've got a compulsion to overeat and you've had it for some period of time, and the behavior continues, it's possible that you begin to generate a belief, I have no control over myself, I am out of control, I am hopeless. That belief then can permeate other areas of your life. The original cause could be just some way you've got food wired up, almost at a behavioral level. But if it permeates the system at a deeper level, then it tends to radiate out into other capabilities and behaviors. So you never really know until you gather information from the person. Georgi, for example, the one you were working with, a simple little behavior, I suspect there's no secondary gain, no big deal, it's not an identity issue, it's blown out, it's done, that's it. But others that may on the surface look straightforward and just like a simple behavior, you don't know until you gather information whether it, just because it looks like a duck, walks like a duck, that it is a duck. Could be a guy in a duck suit, right? With a big bowl of candy or something. Okay, I think we have hopefully just about enough time to do a final pattern today. I want to make sure we have the opportunity to explore. And it has to do with criteria. It's using submodalities to shift criteria. And so those are fine words, and it sounds like a good idea to shift criteria, perhaps. But first, I think we should have a shared understanding of what a criteria is. So what's your understanding of a criteria? Right? We did that with compulsion. We shared our understanding of compulsion. What's a criteria? Something that's important? Somebody say that? Okay. It represents like values, what you value. A way of sorting what's important, what's not important. Right? So another way to say this is that it's a standard of evaluation. Right? Think about buying a car. Think, if you were to go out and buy a new car, what would be important to you in the purchase of a new car? What? Is it looks? Speed? Right? Speed, looks, stability, maneuverability. These are criteria. Economy, that's a criteria. Comfort, reliability. Okay, all of these things are specific criteria in the context of buying a car. So some criteria are context bound. The same criteria that you apply to a car, you might not apply to a wife. Or you might. Right? And if you're confused about the two, you know, right? So quite often criteria are contextually bound, right? You have certain criteria in buying a house that might be different criteria, let's say, in learning something new, right? In learning something new, does it advance your professional status? Does it increase income or whatever? But for the house, is it big enough to handle the grandchildren when they visit? You can have all kinds of different criteria. So criteria express values, those things that are important to us in life, right? One way to think about it. They're a way of sorting out all of the experience. I mean, if you had no criteria and it was time to buy a car, you're in trouble, right? You really are. You need to have some way to narrow down the field. And if they're inappropriate criteria, like you want luxury, but your bank book says Honda, then there's a sort of a mismatch of the criteria to the context. So there's an appropriate structure for them. And another way to think about them is that they're standards of evaluation, right? And we use criteria just about everywhere. We go to a restaurant. We apply criteria to a restaurant. It's like, I don't want to put anybody off on the restaurants in Winter Park, but I find most of them very noisy, personally. Been to 3 or 4 of them, and there's just something about, wow, the ambient noise here. Because I have a criteria when I eat of kind of a relaxation, mellow, and many of the restaurants don't match my criteria. Right? And it might be a criteria of price that you apply, right? Or taste. Some nights you're in the mood for Chinese, some nights it's Spanish. So criteria, can move around a bit. And yet, in the wider frame of who we are, there are other criteria that tend to go across boundaries. Some criteria are so important. Satisfaction, that's a big one, right? Personal satisfaction, right? That personal satisfaction might permeate your job, your relationship, your house, your car. Is there a sense of satisfaction about having or being engaged with this? Watched some of the Democratic National Convention last night, and boy, you want to hear some criteria words, just turn on CNN. Right? It happens during political elections. We're talking about liberty, and we're talking about security, and we're talking about freedom and all these big nominalizations that are criteria words. And the presumption is that most of the voters in the United States at some level value these criteria. So what they're attempting to do is to identify a candidate with the criteria they represent, with the assumption that these match criteria that you have, that freedom is more important to you than lack of freedom, right? That choice is better than no choice, these kinds of things. So, given that as kind of a preamble, let me tell you a brief story about Tim Halbum and a research project that happened years ago when he and Robert Dilts were first putting together the counterexample, the allergy process. And this is when they were just kind of doing the information gathering, the structure of this, and testing out their modeling theory about an effective treatment for allergies. We were at a NLP conference, a national conference in New York, and this is, I'm guessing, maybe 10 years, maybe 12 years ago. And we were at some big hotel, the Hilton or something, where the conference was taking place. We were all doing these various workshops except Tim. Tim was running around in the hallways of the hotel, going up to anyone that would talk to him and he'd say to them, excuse me, but do you have any allergies? Right? Allergies? Right? And he ran across this one guy who didn't happen to be connected with the conference, knew nothing about NLP, not connected with the conference. He was there on a business trip. Tim met him in the hall and said, do you have any allergies? And the guy said, allergies? My God, my life is about allergies. In the last year, I've spent about $25,000 with various allergists, doing research and blood samples, et cetera, and I'm currently down to a couple of types of soy and brown rice. I mean, this guy was allergic to just about everything. So Tim went, come with me, have a seat. And ran him through allergy process, the counterexample process, I think the very first thing they worked on was a guy, among just about most other foodstuffs, the guy was allergic to apples. And Tim had seen a bowl of fruit, so they did the counterexample process on apples first, and at the end of this 20-minute period, the guy was nibbling on an apple. No problem. Tim worked with him like 3 times during that conference on various, I think, different kinds of foods, although he had airborne allergies and et cetera. After the conference, the guy was so impressed, he flew from, I forget where he lived, but he flew to Salt Lake where Tim lived to continue working with him. And within a relatively short period of time, a matter of months, the guy was eating things he'd never imagined he could eat again, drinking things. He wasn't allergic to pollen when it fired off. His life totally transformed. Right? He got so interested in NLP, he did a practitioner training, and I met the guy. I saw him, I'd seen him in the New York thing a couple years earlier, and then 2 years later, I got him in a master practitioner training in Colorado, where I was teaching this chunk of the training. And I was asking the group, does anyone think that they have a criteria that's way too important in their life, that they'd like to have be just a little bit less important, or a criteria that they kind of undervalue and they'd like to have it be more important? This guy's hand goes up, and he says, I got one of each. And so we brought him up, and I asked him, what's going on? And he said, well, for me, what I feel is really undervalued in my life, the criteria that I'd like to have be more important in my life is fun. Well, that's interesting. And I said, what's the one you'd like to be less important? And he said, health. Right? And, first a little ecology flag went off, like, well, that should be an important one, I would think. So I want to be cautious here. But as I explored it, what had happened because of so many years of hyper concern about his allergies, his health, what he could eat, what he couldn't eat, the whole thing about health was the most important criteria in his life. It was with him in his consciousness day to day, right? And fun took a back seat to all his preoccupation with that. And what had happened was that he no longer needed to have health be such a high criteria. And certainly fun could be more highly valued. Right? Right. So this is the way these are the ways that criteria can permeate various aspects of your life. So we did the process we're about to learn here with him and kind of readjusted the way he represented health and the way he represented fun using submodalities, right? To kind of lessen the intensity of the criteria of health and increase the importance of fun in his life. So that's the direction that we're going, and I want you to think about your own lives. I want you to see if you can identify. Well, first let's do this. We've talked about criteria for simple things like car, etc. What kind of criteria are the ones that tend to permeate many contexts of your life? What things are really important to you, right? Challenge, okay? Right. Is this a challenge that I can meet? Is this a challenging thing? That could be a good criteria for some folks. Adventure. Say again? Safety, absolutely. If you don't have this one in place, these two might get you in trouble. Right? So safety. Say again? Being right can be important. Integrity. Say again? Caring. Precision. All right. These are what I would refer to kind of as highly valued criteria. Most of us tend to put a relatively high value on these types of things. Creativity. All right. Okay. All right. A lot of them. Now, when you look at these criteria permeate many different areas of our life, many different contexts. They're important in everything we do. I mean, the notion of, creativity, integrity, and freedom. You could imagine those permeating just about anything. Your relationships, what kind of car you drive, it's still there in the background, although you use other specific criteria for different contexts. Right? So we have a sense with these, most of these, that these are somehow highly valued, and yet we all have different relationships to these. We could rank these on a continuum. For example, Rachel, which one of these for you, which are the two most important? Just gut feeling. What are the two most important ones here? Okay, this one is the number one, and integrity is the number one. Okay, what's the least important of these? Being right is over middle. Okay, that's a least. We'll call that a 10. One more? That's not Rachel's. Precision. Okay? So in Rachel's reality, freedom and integrity, highly valued, and much less so are precision and being right. Okay? Jim, what are yours? Say two most important. If you look at all those, or any others you care to jot up here. Really, really important to you. I just saw it. There it is. Okay. So for Jim, that's a 1. Now, it's interesting. See, he has the answer to this, as did Rachel, as do you all. My question is, how do it know? How do you know one's more important than another? I'm sorry, you were saying relationship? Okay, that's a high value. What's the lowest value on this little chart? Just, you know. Or less important than those.
The one reason I'm struggling with this
Mhm.
is, for most of my life I've been after mistakes, so I could have devalued that,
Uh-huh.
but I have lots of clients where that's so high because they'll never say.
Right. So you can make a distinction between self and clients.
Right,
So for you, it's not that big a deal.
no,
But for them, it can be very high.
but in another context, if my life were different, that is, but in my present life, I
Right.
don't think a lot about this.
Yeah, I would say this is a guy that's really good at going to second position. So safety, that could be, you know, a lower value criteria. And all of us could do this, right? And some of them may be almost the same that, you know, wow, I value challenge and adventure. They're both up there at about the same level or whatever. But we could somehow take these words and go inside and come back with the answer, one, this one's more important than this one. Right? And what I'm suggesting to you is the way that you do that is that you're referring at an unconscious level to the way you structure representations associated with these words in submodalities. Submodalities are what rank criteria on a continuum. All right? And let's explore that more fully. Think about things in your life that you tend to give too much sense of importance to. Like, you know, you're a neat freak, so things got to be really neat, or you have to really never offend anybody, right? Or maybe you have to always do the right thing, right? That's a criteria, doing the right thing. Think of something that you kind of do too much of for some reason. You wish it wasn't that big a deal. You'd like to have it be a little bit less important. Anybody got any of those floating around?
Yeah, I'm trying to say it at the right time, the right way. Always compromising.
Okay. So this is, and you compromise because, how come you compromise?
To avoid arguments.
Okay, right, to maintain peace,
Yeah.
right? Okay, maintain harmony,
Right.
right? And so that, you do a little bit too much of that,
Yes.
right? So that thing of that criteria of maintaining harmony is kind of overwhelming other things, maybe, right? Or it's a little bit, you spend too much time and energy doing it, all right?
Well, it feels like, in a way, I'm not doing either myself or the other person a service in
Right.
doing that because I'm not really offering my opinion and just plain agreeing with the other person.
So letting another person be right,
Yeah,
right? You know, the way that you go for harmony is you let them be right.
right.
Right, okay, so that's a little bit higher than it should be. You do that way too often. All right, others got any little behaviors like that, these sort of pervasive behaviors and attitudes, orientations?
Sounds like you, I can relate to
got to be perfect. Got to be perfect. Yeah, I see some head nods there, yeah. But it's funny, those didn't come out immediately. Well, I thought that was okay. I thought we're all supposed to be perfect. But yeah, this compulsive, I can't send this email. I haven't really tuned it up the way it should be. It's got to be perfect, or I can't let them see this, whatever it is, production until it's absolutely correct. Sometimes it just takes way too long. It's that thing of, perfection. Having to be just right could be a criteria that's too highly valued. And life would actually improve if it was a little bit less so. Others got examples of this kind of thing? A criteria that's too important in your life? Say again? Perfectionism, very similar to this, yeah. Again, got to be correct and explicit, just the right thing. All right?
Worry too much about the opinions of others. I don't know if that.
All right? Yeah. Okay. Respecting other people's boundaries at the expense of your own sometimes. Worried about what they think or what their response is going to be. Caring too much about them, right? Well, that can generate all kinds of behaviors and permeate, I got to make sure they're okay and that kind of thing. Right? So caring too much about what they think or what their attitude is, certainly. Say again? Sleep. Sure. Specific behaviors, right? I need at least 12 hours a night. I don't know. I wish that was a little bit less important, right? All right, so often these things of criteria that are too highly valued lurk within. How about the flip side of that? How about undervalued criteria? Some criteria you'd like to be more important. Think about these. Okay? Honoring yourself. That would be worthwhile if that were a more important criteria. Okay, let's put some of those down. These are kind of the highly valued ones. They might be somewhat the same. So what might be criteria that you undervalue that you would like to value more? So we've got honoring self. Health, did I hear? Yeah. Health, undervalued. Humor and enjoyment. Family. Play. Right. Letting loose. I can't believe that came from you. Holy smokes, I don't know if we want to adjust that one in him anymore. Security. Yeah, that can limit you. If it's too much, you're constantly preoccupied. But if it's undervalued, you do things that are dangerous and foolish sometimes. So security could be one that is undervalued and you want to have more. So they can be on either side, either undervalued criteria that you want to make more important, or some that you think you value too highly, like the guy I was talking about with health, that you want to kind of tune down a little bit. So, Anne, could I explore this thing? I liked this thing of honoring yourself. That was an interesting one. That's certainly worth being more important. Yeah. It's a nice little. Oh, we got a. Oh, wait a minute. Let's do this. We'll track on this one. Oops, and then we'll. So, honoring yourself. So, the way you would say it is honoring myself. You want that to be more important.
Yes.
Is that right? All right. Now, given the discussion that we've had about criteria, what to you, in all of these criteria, is a more important criteria even than honoring yourself?
Relationships.
Relationships themselves. Relationships are more important than honoring yourself.
Yes.
Right? And that's something that you're okay with and you want it to remain that way, that relationships and the ability to connect is more important than honoring yourself.
Well, what I've noticed as a pattern is I seem to value other people and second position more than I value myself.
Okay.
So that part of relating, I don't code as healthy.
Okay.
Which is why I'm saying I think it's important that I honor myself more.
So that you can have more healthy relationships?
That's one
Really?
part of it. And
Okay.
also because I can value tasks and work more than myself, which in the example we were doing just now with emails can mean I can go into working too long on them, going into overwork,
Right.
at the neglect of my own ecology.
Right.
And those are people around me, so it's counterproductive.
Great. So I'm getting information here about why this is a problem. Because she undervalues honoring herself. It permeates lots of different things. It affects her relationships and how she relates. It can affect her work and what she does, etc. So it makes perfect sense that she'd want this to be more important, because if it is, it's going to affect those areas of life.
Very
Right?
definitely.
Great. Then I want you to think at a even kind of a higher level than beyond relationships, beyond
Okay.
honoring yourself. What's more important than either of those in your life? And think about all of it,
Okay.
all of life.
Living out my purpose on this planet.
Okay? Living out my purpose on the planet. This is a criteria, living it out, that's more important than honoring yourself the way you experience it now. Okay? Living out my purpose. A very highly valued criteria. Now, let's think of one that's much less important than honoring yourself. Something that's really no big deal, but it's something, a criteria used from time to time. And it could be anything, you know, comfort, cleanliness, orderliness, just some criteria that's, to you, less important than honoring yourself.
Any scale of less important.
Any. Yeah.
Okay, well, I know, just, but creativity.
Creativity is less important than honoring
I'm not
yourself.
sure, I'm just
Okay, so if
weighing
you're not
them up.
sure, you don't want to use it.
Yes,
That's
I
what I'm
won't use
saying.
that one.
That's what I'm saying, something
Okay.
that's, you know, kind of mundane, but you still.
Yeah, less important than honoring myself.
How about just sort of the everyday personal comfort?
Okay.
Is honoring yourself more important than just personal comfort? Or would you rather be comfortable than honor yourself?
That's a good question.
Okay, well, maybe not that one either.
Okay, less important.
Then honoring yourself. This is must be the bottom of the pile here. You know?
You know, everything that pops up is sort of, wow.
Well, I don't know. Everything's the way I feel. Everything's more important to me than honoring myself. Oh my God. Feeding the dog. I don't know.
No, that would be lower.
Would it?
Yes.
Right, but is it important?
I don't have a dog.
Should have expected that one, right? Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I used to have a dog, and yeah.
All right, well, we don't want to go there.
No, we don't want to go.
All right, would you say that this thing of honoring yourself is really such an undervalued?
Look, I found something.
Oh, good. What?
It would be things like, you know, paying rent, paying bills and stuff like that.
Okay, that's less important
Oh,
than
yeah.
honoring yourself. Okay, so paying the bills, and this is paying the bills. Keeping creditors happy, you know, that's a criteria. Paying the bills.
I don't think of it like that.
I got you. So we have three of them. We have one that is one that she wants to make more important. And what we're going to do is compare how she represents all of these with submodalities. The higher value criteria of living out your purpose and the lower value criteria of paying the bills.
Okay.
Okay? So we're going to go through them one at a time. And I already have some information about how, I'm already beginning to form a hypothesis about how she structures these with submodalities based on her hand gestures. So if you were watching at any point, what did she do with her hands a couple of times when I was saying a less highly valued criteria? She was doing that for a while when she was doing a comparison. But a couple of times she went, okay, lower valued, and went like that, boom, boom, boom. So that's just information I log away. And then I get explicit information by saying, I want you to think about paying the bills.
Okay.
Okay? And notice how you represent it. So this could be like the time of month when you pay the bills, or there's a couple on the desk, or however, whatever it is.
It's black and white.
Okay?
It's boring. It's
Right, I'm going to jot some of these submodalities down. And when you do this, I want you to do it similar to the way you elicited your timeline. track all the submodalities, but I want you to attend particularly to location.
Okay.
Because we're going to do a couple of representations at the same time. So paying the bills is black and white. Is it a movie or a slide or
It's just a slide. It's just like a still picture.
still?
It's about there.
And it's out in front, just slightly below level.
Yeah,
Okay, so front.
yeah. But it might even.
Any auditory with it?
Can't hear anything.
Okay, no big deal with auditory.
And it's usually visual because they're sort of stacked up on the side.
Stacked up over here. Okay, great. So we're going to leave that there, just like we did apples and oranges in the timeline. Just let that be.
Okay.
And then I want you to think about honoring myself. Or my elf. I'm sorry.
I can.
That's why we're having a problem. I want to honor my elf. Here. For you viewers at home, that's myself.
Right.
Sorry.
That's about here.
Okay? And check it out for other submodalities. It's,
I get a kinesthetic sense in there.
okay, kinesthetic chest level. Okay, in the chest. How about color, black and white, still, movie?
Oh, there's quite a lot of blue in there. There's quite a
Okay.
lot of color. Yeah. Voice in the head. Yeah, there's some movement in it. There's some movement
Okay,
in
a
it.
little bit of movement.
Yeah.
Movement,
Some color.
color. Okay,
But
great.
yeah, not very bright.
Not very bright. Okay. Not bright. Okay, now let's go to that really highly valued criteria of living out your purpose.
Okay.
Whoa, look at that, right? And this is what happens. So when you represent that, right,
Oh, that's like a rainbow.
a
It's
rainbow,
really bright and energizing, and I feel very connected. And I'm hearing music.
all right? So when you listen to the music, I want you to tell me some of the submodalities. Is it loud? Is it stereophonic? Is it high pitch, low pitch?
It's mid-range. Mid-range. I'm not musical.
Okay,
It's
That's
a
all
good,
right,
that's
just
a good identity. That's good.
the basics, you know, mid-range,
It's
musical.
it's very inspirational.
What makes it inspirational submodality-wise? Is it the beat?
Submodality-wise, okay.
Is it
It's
the beat, the tempo, the volume,
the tempo, the slow tempo,
slow tempo?
mid-volume, and some of the instruments you'd hear sort of bells and
Okay, so it's sort of is that like a figure ground distinction with the, you know, you hear the sound and it pops out?
yeah, just
the
very
sound.
gentle. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, and then location.
Right across
Whoa,
here.
I kind of figured. It's like this big overarching thing.
Yeah.
All right. Now I want you to leave them all up there, right? And let's give me a little bit of information about size. I understand the living life's purpose is up here. It's like a big rainbow.
That's right.
And then honoring yourself is
about
here,
there.
and just a general size, if you were to,
About that
okay? And then paying bills is located where and how big?
About that.
So it's smaller and it's down to the right. Okay, so now we have sufficient information. The location is going to be very important, but some of these other submodalities are too. The most significant difference is the more important the criteria, the more auditory is represented, for one thing. The higher in the theater of her mind it is in terms of location, and the bigger. So we have kind of three different submodality distinctions here that are going to be very useful. Right? And these are the ones we're going to use to begin to adjust honoring myself. Right? Now, do you want honoring yourself to be as important as living out your life's purpose? How important do you want it to be?
I see it just below.
Gotcha. Great. So,
So
you're already
it's-
beginning to do this.
Situates within that.
Great. All right. So here's what I'd like us to begin to do. When you change criteria, you approach it with the same ecology as you do changing timelines, because it's one of those sort of bedrock foundations of who we are. It really does help establish and determine what our identity is. So you do it with a lot of respect. You do it slowly, with the understanding you can always have it be back the way it was or whatever. So
Oh,
we're gonna-
sure.
Right. Not that we'll have to. We could do something else.
Oh, good.
And here's what I'd like us to begin doing. take this representation, however you were seeing it a moment ago, of honoring yourself, and
Okay.
take all of the content and begin to locate it where you want it to be by raising it up and kind of expanding it. And as it goes up, I want you to allow it to become brighter and brighter, whatever it is that you see, and begin to hear some auditory with it. Whatever sound is appropriate, kind of a mid-range sort of sound, with a slow kind of tempo, just the appropriate kind of music that goes with it, and adjust it very carefully between, where it is now and above it, is this living out your life's purpose. So just sort of fit it in there, letting your intuitive body, that kind of fine kinesthetic response, be your guide, right? Until it feels, wow, that's exactly where I want it. And again, the higher it goes, the larger, the brighter, right? The more expansive it becomes, and there's some auditory along with it.
Yeah, I get a sense of it being connected to the purpose now.
Great.
I get a sense of it being light.
Right.
I get a sense right down my midline body.
Wonderful. Do you have a sense of also being connected to it? You say it's connected to purpose.
Okay.
And I'm just curious, because you said that you had a sense that the living's life's purpose, you had a sense of connection to it.
I'm not sure, There's a little bit of dissociation there.
That's okay, and that may be all right. You might explore it both ways, having a sense of being directly connected with honoring yourself, or as you spontaneously kind of have done it, having honoring yourself be spontaneously connected to your living your life's purpose. And if that feels the right way, you're the one who knows.
That kind of feels the right way, yeah.
Great.
So I've got to,
Great. Until that feels just right. It's a very subtle kind of internal sensory acuity that you use. You'll know when it feels right. You got it?
Yeah,
And
that's
where you
the
want it.
place.
Great. Then allow it to be there.
How do I do that?
You just let it be. And you'll notice that it'll just maintain its position. You don't even need your hands. Right? Watch what happens. It stays right there because it's connected to your life's purpose.
Okay.
And you can begin to experience this whole thing of honoring yourself in that way. And notice how you feel when that occurs. And it's that important. And you begin to get an idea of how you'll be moving through the world, honoring yourself in this way. And the kinds of changes that can reverberate through time. Behaviors that may shift. Some of them simple behaviors, some more profound in relationship, in communication. Just really get a sense of it in this kind of timeline in front of you.
That's
coming
my,
out here.
That's my new one.
Great. And begin to generate these kind of experiences that are expressive of honoring the whole thing of honoring yourself in this way, with this degree of importance. Things that you'll do differently, ways you'll relate differently. And just let that timeline spontaneously shift to be in alignment with the importance of that criteria of honoring yourself, which is linked to living out your life's purpose.
It actually leads to some of the others. I was talking about fun and enjoyment and all
Right.
that stuff.
Yeah, that's when you change one like that, it is linked to others. So spontaneously, criteria and behaviors like fun and enjoyment, they can kind of rise up out of the background. You notice, hey, these are more important than I thought, too. That's kind of nice. They're evidence of me honoring myself. I'm having more fun. Right? Living my life's purpose.
Yeah.
And just notice that this future that you're observing here is more than an illusion on your arm. Right? This is your future. Right? This truly is. The one that you are going to step into more and more congruently every moment.
Okay. Yeah. That feels right.
Great. And just let that set in. Know that you can kind of enhance this through conscious contemplation of the future. You can also allow your unconscious to begin to generate these interesting kinds of connections, like with fun, and like that, so that your unconscious can kind of surprise and delight you, right, in the future.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Just take all the time you want until it really feels.
What I'd like to do is just want to have a couple of minutes to ride above my timeline
Please
and,
do.
and slot these things in.
Great. And while you're doing that, I may be addressing the group and just talking. So you just take all the time you need to do that. Okay, so I want to backtrack on it. Essentially what we're doing is we're identifying either a criteria that someone wants to make less important or one more important. In this case, it was one she wanted to make more important. Then you bracket it, right? You identify the criteria to be changed. And then you just simply ask what's less important, what's more important. So then you have 3 criteria, and they're already kind of intellectually ranked on a continuum. One's more important, one's less important. And then you elicit the submodalities of each. And you're looking for submodalities that rank these criteria on a continuum. Right? You ask them, okay, so think about paying the bills. Oh, okay. Sitting at my desk, it's over there, it's small, it's dark, no sound, located over here. We're familiar with that through all the submodality exploration we've been doing. Then you have them go to the, in this case, the middle one, the one they want to change. What's that like? Got this list of submodalities, right? Began to be movement and color, that was different. It was at chest level. The location is going to be of prime importance. Location, size, and things like color, movement, and brightness. This can often be very important. Then we had her think about, okay, think about how you represent or think about living your life's purpose. And boom, you saw, I mean, it's instantly. Eyes go up, it's up there, it's a big picture, it's a rainbow, it's a lot of color, it's bright, it's connected. And there was all these auditory submodalities. So you understand, if you compare these, you have a continuum of a number of submodalities. The first is location and space. They go whoop, boom, boom, right? So there's a continuum, a ranking with submodalities. The other is with size. Starts off small, medium, and huge. So that's 2 submodalities. Not only location, low to high, but size. And then this thing of brightness, the intensity, each one, I got brighter. And finally up here, you have kind of the addition of these submodalities. So in order to make this mid-range one more important, I code it with the submodalities of importance. I move it in the direction of that. So, and I let her do it. I give her the suggestion to do it and put it where it felt right. And it's amazing. It's just like this intuitive inner knowing. You know exactly where you want it to go. There's no doubt about it. So she starts moving it, goes up here, it expands. And just verbally, I kind of supported some of these other submodality changes, like there may be some sound associated with it, and I explored this thing of connection. But primarily, I'm allowing her to put it and code it where she wants it to be, as important as she wants it to be, right? But I'm using these submodalities as a guide to make it easy for her to do. Questions about that structure of it, how you can elicit a mid-range, the one they want to change, something more important, something less important. Those are just basically words. And then you elicit the submodalities. And the prime submodalities, the kind that you want to really watch out for, the primary one is location. Sometimes they'll be immediate and big and bright in front, and then they'll kind of fade away out in the distance. They may have a different linear construction. The less important might be behind. It could be any kind of structure. This one's a pretty characteristic, sort of hierarchical one. And there's likely to be other submodality codings also, things of brightness, right? Increasing or decreasing. Questions about this little review as it indexes to the demonstration? How you doing over there?
Oh, great. Oh, fabulous.
Wonderful.
I've just installed rainbows plus me in a whole lot of places.
Wonderful. Great. Cool. Well, enjoy.
Thank you very
Absolutely.
much. Thank you.
Done a lot of work today. Okay.
No kidding.
Yep, you're in for a good night's sleep tonight.
And I think you could see that I wanted to.
Yes, I kind of picked up on that. Okay, well, I'll tell you what. I see by the hands of the old clock on the wall that I do not want to rush through this. I don't want to say, okay, jump in a group 10 minutes, 15, we'll go a little bit late. I want you to have ample opportunity. This is one that I want to make sure that study groups, you have an opportunity to do this. All right, so this is one. There's a couple other, as is often the case with the manual, you've got some spare exercises in there. So there's a couple here this weekend, this 2 days, we didn't have an opportunity to do explicitly as a group. You have the background experience to do them. There's that one on simple submodality interventions in your handouts. It's just that was included for a way for you guys to play with your brains and explore submodalities. This one is important enough that I really want you to set aside time in the study group or have it supervised in some way that you have the opportunity to do it congruently. But I do want to check, and I want you to imagine kind of future pacing this to see what kind of questions you may have about this. All right? You can do either one. You can increase the importance of a criteria, or you can decrease one. Jim, was that a?
Can you give me an example?
Sure.
Because if, an example, you're going to have a question for me. Working with this couple, he's the guy mentioned is very compulsive.
Right.
And routine is one of the things.
Right.
He likes to do things in the same way. He's
Right.
very predictable. He's very bright.
Right.
He's gifted.
Right.
So anytime his wife says, well, let's do this,
Mm-hmm.
immediately he says no. Because routine is somewhere way up here.
Okay.
And right now, and responding to her needs in
Mhm.
some other place. I
Okay.
don't know where it is.
Right.
And I'm not sure whether he will want to do that.
Right.
I mean, part of him does, but part
Right.
of him,
Right.
he's so compulsive about routine.
Right.
And his life feels so chaotic if he doesn't stick to his routine.
Right.
So I'm wondering, if I said intuitively now, move, honoring Jennifer's needs somewhere else, higher.
Right.
Is he going to want to do that?
Right. Well, there's a number of things to that. The first thing is that what's going to make it effective for him is to find out how he codes criteria with submodalities.
Yeah.
I mean, it really doesn't work to say, okay, take it and just move it up and make it brighter, right? You need to find out how they code for one. The other thing that occurs to me, you need to find out what really motivates or moves him. Routine is one, but her needs may not be that may not be the biggest. He may want instead, for example, spontaneity to be more important, right? And if he works with that, then suddenly a lot of different doorways open, right? So it really is, it's oriented to the client in that way. You have to find out what,
Something that's valuable to him that he will
right,
bring more value.
right. So you could, and if, in your position, if you see it as a limitation, this whole thing of, wasn't orderliness, it was routine, okay? You could explore how it limits him with him. So he understands, wow, this is a limitation, right? And kind of pace him into the realization that this is overvalued, right?
Yeah.
And then, once you get that kind of implicit compliance that he's willing to explore it, then you simply identify something that is, and appropriately so, more important than routine. My love of God, how I treat my grandchildren, whatever it may be, and what's the less important. And then you can begin to explore them. If it's a parts issue, it's interesting because a parts conflict can pop up anytime. Parts are funny things, right? My rule of thumb is with parts is if they pop up, deal with them, right? Integrate any kind of internal conflict and then proceed, right? If it were, what might be a counterexample or another part as opposed to this thing of, keep wanting to say orderliness, and that's not right. It's
He uses the word routine.
routine.
I like my routine.
Right.
I don't want to disrupt it.
Great. Is there any counterexample to that in his experience? Or your experience of him?
Well, actually, when he goes on vacation,
Mm-hmm.
he moves into this whole different modality.
That makes sense. Yeah, kind of a dissociated part of self. It cuts loose and
Yeah, but when he's at home
Right.
and he's working,
right,
it's got to be this way.
right. Okay. All right. Again, it's going to depend on the individual. let me suggest that you keep that question in the back of your mind until after Adam does re-imprinting. Because a lot of behaviors like that, and even perhaps this one that we just explored, a lot of these things have their source in the past.
Yeah, and I understand from knowing the story,
Right.
how this way,
Right,
it makes a huge amount of sense.
right.
About why this specific criteria.
Yeah. So sometimes there's a syntax to change, right? One way to think about it is the way that Dilts has kind of presented it, is there's remedial, generative, and evolutionary change. Remedial change is cleaning up the past, basically, old problems. Generative change is dealing with the way that you represent life right now. And evolutionary change is this kind of shift at the identity or spiritual level. They all have different implications. And it's not always the case, but quite often, if you take care of the remedial aspect first, for example, do re-imprinting with a gentleman like this, to begin to soften up the whole structure, then for him, the importance of shifting this routine is going to be a lot more obvious, right? If he's got some imprints in there, some belief structures that I must maintain routine or I will die, that's going to be hard to change, right? But if you begin to shift those beliefs first, then, wow, it's going to yield quite easily. Okay? Great. Other questions or observations about this? Again, as you think forward to being with a partner, running them through it, is it clear that it has implications, and the criteria, adjusting criteria is actually a higher level change. We're talking about beliefs and identity here. It's not talking about behaviors in the environment, although those may change. This is kind of a big gun, so to speak. But even though it's dealing and exploring with those kinds of issues, it is a straightforward, very simple submodality pattern. I mean, this continues to kind of blow my mind that you can use such small chunk precise aspects of NLP like submodalities and get such big, profound, pervasive change. Right? Without a lot of psychotherapeutic interpretation, without a lot of content, as long as it's ecological, right? That change can be very, very rapid. And the change can be very pervasive, too.
One of the key skills for this video is calibration.
Absolutely. It's funny because I opened the practitioner training last week, and it's sort of like it in a practitioner. They don't quite get it. They don't quite get the importance of calibration. They think you kind of done the calibration exercise. Okay, I got the calibration now. And it's really not like that. I mean, calibration pervades everything you do in NLP forever because you can only get better at it the more you practice. And everything you do is absolutely based on your calibration, right? What your senses are giving you in terms of information about that other person and their map of the world. So calibration is not just physiology and breathing. Boy, it's the whole structure.